How you doing, Devin?
Hi, Stefan. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. Good to speak to you today.
It's
Um,
fantastic to speak with you as well. Thank you very much for your time.
cheers for speaking to you. I just realised it's my first time doing an interview in this new room, so I'm sort of just making.
Oh, yeah?
Looks all right, right? That looks okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I watched a film yesterday. It's really kind of good fun. I love a good kind of slasher movie like this. And obviously, it's one of those movies that really kind of keeps you guessing as well. I just wondered if you can recall the first time you kind of read the script and if it felt quite similar, kind of, if you went on the same journey that I've kind of gone on as an audience member watching it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure I did. I mean, I remember the first time reading it, I was just very I just loved Erik and Carson's unique voice coming through the page. I thought, what a cool love letter to slashers and horrors, but also it's a bit of tongue-in-cheek fun. You can see the different archetypes that come through some of the characters and how they, sort of contrast against some of the more straight man characters. And I always love when a stereotyped character, when the joke is more on that character, not at the expense of someone else. And I kind of feel like, and it's not, obviously not a comedy, but there are some intentionally funny bits. And I think it's always at like kind of the expense of like, not at the expense, but in the irony of those archetypes and the self-awareness of that. And so those parts always really surprise me. And then I also just really like, there's just something about a small town kind of intimate, especially when you throw in a mayoral campaign, where you have a little bit of politicalness, but it's also something that's quite secular. It's not as big. It is really about this small community. It always gives like these interesting layers and these interesting avenues to like have a little bit of trouble throughout. So yeah, it was really surprising, but in the best ways.
I mean, it was quite gory at times. I just feel like I might be wrong here, but there was just, were there just actors hanging around covered in blood, queuing up at the
Oh
canteen?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. The typical, you got some cornstarch syrup and some red food coloring. Really interesting actually about that fake blood. It doesn't freeze at like water temperatures. So when you leave that stuff outside, it can't freeze, but it feels frozen. And then if you have to have it on you, I can tell you from some of the people that I spoke with, it is cold. It is very cold.
I'm interested to know about because obviously you're as an actor you kind of have to go behind the curtain of a horror movie, so you see the kind of all the kind of the mechanics of how it kind of comes to be and how the scares are kind of put into place. I just wonder,
Yeah.
as an actor, do you find that you have a different kind of a relationship now with movies when you watch them? Because obviously when you do step behind the curtain,
Mm.
do you find horror movies now slightly less scary, or how do you what's your relationship now with films when you watch it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really great question. I think it really is all about like, I don't know, perspective isn't really the word, but it's kind of like intention, if I'm really sitting down and like take for example, I just mentioned this year's Talk to Me from the Philippines. Love that film so much. It was such a fantastic horror movie. It was a great kind of addition to the genre sphere. I think they did such a great job of bringing their expertise of like really, really heavy impact, really visceral gore. And as a filmmaker who has seen behind the curtains kind of like how that's made, it's cool because even in that moment, I was so viscerally affected by what I was seeing on the screen that I had to look away from that film and I had to remind myself, I had to be like, okay, just outside the frame, there's a guy holding a boom. There's somebody out there yelling, more blood, go. You know what I mean? I had to change my perspective of how I looked at it in order to kind of calm myself down about it. So it's kind of, it's like I kind of have to think about it, but I can still immerse myself pretty well into these horror films. But I guess if I get a little anxious or something, it is a nice tool to be able to be like, it's just a movie. I know how this is done. That's fine.
I, I,
Yeah.
I honestly think, talk to me, it was the most visceral reaction I've had to a movie. And honestly, I since I can
Oh
remember,
my gosh.
because I was in my, I like you, the scene when obviously the younger brother was hitting
Yep.
his head. I could,
Dude,
get chills thinking
yeah,
about.
I think part of it one, what a phenomenal young actor doing that. And when I was looking at that, I was like, oh my gosh, this kid, he's so young. This is like it was heartbreaking to me to see such a young, kind of sweet face like hurting themselves like that. And I think it's creative decisions like that where what is going to tug at somebody. You know, it's not necessarily, you know, there's not a demon back there pulling his head down or whatever. It's just the act of it that is building that tension and builds that up for audiences. And I think that that is an instinct that both Erik and Carson have so well ingrained in their vision and in their voice with Founders Day as well.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do what you do. I'm going to imagine someone with a boom to get me through
You
different.
have to, yeah. Sometimes you're just like, yeah, what's outside of this frame? What do I imagine? You know what I mean? If the actors like from the waist up, you can imagine they're in their sweats or something. I'm wearing my slippers right now, so maybe they're doing that.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
I
I
was
don't
got
know.
me thinking, and this is going to sort of tie to Founders Day as well, which obviously, because I saw talk to me earlier last year, and obviously now we're in the kind of Oscars season. It got me thinking, like, why aren't horror movies kind of treated on those kind of terms? And but after the awards, but
Sure.
I mean, there's a bit of a misconception that horrors require maybe less of actors. But your character, for example, in Founders Day, there's a lot going on, isn't there? It's a really complex,
Yeah.
tons going through his mind. Was it a challenge for you? And do you think that we need to give more kind of, I don't know, pay more significance to the kind of the horror movie and what actors have to do to get into the heads of their roles?
Oh, absolutely. There, I mean, I think horror on the whole is starting to open up people's minds in regards to how it's typically been viewed and been kind of accepted by, you know, the critic, you know, sort of areas of the industry and the academy and so forth. I think, you know, one of the glaring kind of examples of this is Toni Collette in Hereditary, not winning the Oscar for that, just an incredible performance. And I think, you know, again, we're year after year now in this amazing horror renaissance, seeing more unique voices and incredible actors that want to pair with these visionary directors and tell these incredible stories. And I think sooner or later, it's, you know, that will burst wide open. Um, yeah, I think horror is just it provides so much interesting opportunity because there's, yeah, it's almost kind of like, oh my gosh, people would kind of come for me, but I guess the way I can kind of equate it is like if you think about the bubble of what an MCU movie is, like a Marvel movie, and how some directors are now entering that MCU space and they're like, okay, it's not just a superhero movie. Let's do a political thriller action MCU movie with the Winter Soldier. Let's do like a funny one with Deadpool. You know what I mean? People are starting to be like, oh yeah, horror movies isn't just this or that. It's like we can do a really gory psychological slasher. We can do a kind of funny tongue-in-cheek political thriller like this. You can do, you know, all of these different opportunities that give you, as well as like the amazing historical you know, examples that we have as well. You know, you could do like some French fantastique elements that, you know, originated in horror as well and kind of have like a surreal vibe without your films. And they're all, you know, it's kind of, you kind of have like a free pass to like explore the genre and bend the reality in a weird way within horror, which I think might open up some creative eyes for different, you know, directors and visionaries out there.
Yeah, it's sort of a genre that has loads of rules, but then no rules at the same time, if that makes sense.
Exactly. Exactly. There's so many, you know, it's like an empty playroom almost. As long as you're like within the playroom, you can basically do whatever you want within that room. Um, and even then, I don't even know, you know, I'm obviously not a director, but I think there's so many really cool directors that are also breaking down those different walls of like what is to be expected with a horror movie. You know, I think right off the top of my head, like Nope is like a cool example. I think, you know, people don't think about it like a traditional horror film, but definitely for me, I remember I was watching an interview with Jordan Peele and he was talking about you know, that concept kind of came to him. I think he said something about like he was trying to see if he could convince people to watch Close Encounters, and then if like halfway through he could make the audience realize that they were watching Jaws or something like that. I think was like the quote that he said, and I thought that like that was such an interesting into to something like this. You know, with like it's kind of like a shark, you know, like catching like this beast movie, but it's also there's bumps in the night and you don't know what people are going up for. Yeah.
You sort of mentioned just then, you said you're not a director, but I was going to ask, because obviously you look at directors like Jordan, he went from an actor to a
Yeah.
Erik, of course, who directed Father's Day, is very young as well, sort of showing that, you know, there's no kind of age to it. I just wondered if you've got any ambitions or ideas that maybe one day you could step behind the lens.
I mean, maybe, I mean, never say never. I definitely, I love movies. I love movies and TV. I love making them. I'm count myself so lucky and so privileged to have had a career that spans the length of time that it has already, and to have gotten to work with such amazing people all the way through that. And actually, just recently, my right before the holidays, my girlfriend, her name is Annie Marie Elliott. She's a great actor and director as well. She and I have been developing, and we just did our first horror short film together that she directed. We produced it together. She wrote it. I'm the lead in it with her. And we had this incredible ensemble cast. This really cool horror short proof of concept film called Agonist. We're in post production right now, trying to hopefully maybe get that to premiere at a really cool festival, and hopefully get to do the talk to me treatment, and bring it to some really cool partners like maybe A24 or Blumhouse, someone, make it into the feature film. And yeah, hopefully have more opportunities like that to contribute to the space, and having that producer role, getting to be on the other side, and kind of it definitely, I've gotten a taste for it. I do love being behind the camera a little bit as well. I don't know if directing is what I will immediately jump to next, but I'm definitely gonna continue producing and developing my own projects, especially like, my Annie and I have been together 5.5 years now, and so now also having our partnership in a place where she's my best friend, she's my soulmate, she's my like life partner, and now we're also creative partners and making things together and building something together. It's, I think it's like, kind of personally for me, it's the coolest thing that you can do if you're like working in this industry in LA, is like have your best friend and your partner be like, that for you, and getting to make your own stuff. So yeah, it's amazing, and to get to like support her and like see her do that has been like the coolest thing.
I love to work with my wife, but she's a lawyer and I know nothing.
Oh,
So
yeah, it's like, what would you do in the in the lawyer space?
yeah, maybe she could just represent me in court if I plagiarize someone. I don't know, but
I've always wanted to like type, be one of the people that's like typing out everything in a courtroom. I think that'd be so interesting.
yeah, it's kind of similar to a script supervisor. Maybe we can find some link. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I
Yeah,
mean,
I don't know, maybe that.
but you're working, of course, with Amy Hargreaves again in this, obviously, who you've worked with before in 13 Reasons Why. I just wondered, but just on a kind of more general point, when you kind of go onto set and there's someone you've worked with before on another project, is that having that familiar
Yeah.
around? How nice and comforting is that? And do you still keep in touch with all the 13 Reasons Why collective? Is there still a active WhatsApp group?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely it. I mean, it does such an amazing thing for your onset, enthusiasm and your just comfort. At least for me, as I've gotten older, I've gotten more and more homesick. Like whenever I go away, I don't know if that's a product of having, a girlfriend and a family of cats back at home that are, yearning for my attention. But it definitely plays a little something into it. And when we shot this in New Milford, Connecticut. So I remember when I landed in New York, Erik and Carson were actually the ones that picked me up from the airport, and they were immediately just so kind and so sweet and just such great human beings. So that immediately made me feel pretty comfortable. But having Amy there and knowing that she was going to be there, I remember we saw each other and we just had like the biggest reunion hug. And she's someone like we're always keeping in touch. She and I share a birthday. We're both January 27th. So we're both having a birthday in about 10 days, which is fun. Um, yeah, so I'm always saying happy birthday to my twin. And she, funnily enough, she's actually the reason that I am a part of this project. She was attached as Blair Gladwell before myself, and she actually called me and she was like, "Hey, what are you doing October to November?" And I was like, "I'm not doing anything." She's like, "I'm doing this movie. It's called Founders Day. I just worked with these two brothers on their last film and I had such a great experience. They're incredible. They're just so fun to collaborate with. It's going to be a great time. There's a role for you. I think they'd love to have you. You should meet with them." And through that recommendation, I was like, "Absolutely, Amy, if you're playing in New York, I'd love to come play in New York." And so I had a great conversation with Erik and Carson, and I just got everything from them that Amy said that I would, and it just felt like it'd be such a great time. And Amy is again one of those people where she recommends someone or she says something that means a lot. That's a gold star next to your name. So yeah, then just getting there and just and honestly, like the entire ensemble, our entire cast, our entire crew, everybody was amazing. Just great, not only talent and enthusiasm, but just great vibes. Everybody was always so happy to be there. Everybody was happy to be working. It was one of those like really cool sets where everyone is just vibing and doing, even the hard, tough days. I remember my last 3 days on of shooting, it was like I think my third to last day. I midway through the day, I was wearing a full coat and I could not get warm. And I was like, what is going on? And then I got back to my hotel and I still could not get warm. And I turned my heater up to 80 degrees and I could not get warm. And I was like, oh no, I'm sick. And then my last 2 days of shooting had the worst flu of my life. We had to do some shots that was like it was an outdoor exterior shot at night that I think we had to shoot at 2 in the morning. It was 27 degrees out with the flu. I think it was myself and Olivia Nikkanen, who plays my sister Melissa, and we both come down with the flu, and we're both out there working at 2 in the morning, 27 degrees. We're freezing, and we're still looking at each other. We're like, yeah, it could be worse. It could be so much worse. And it's like those are like, it's like those are also the conditions like I love putting myself in with independent film. It's like, come on, we're all out there working together. You've got your focus puller and your sound guy. Everybody's braving the storm together. But it was just one of those things where it's like even on the hard days, you're having fun and everybody is in such good spirits and enthusiastic. It's like that does something for your energy and your spirit. Yeah, so it was always just such a great time. My 13 Reasons Why castmates as well, we're always all in touch. I just saw Tyler Barnhart and Timothy Granaderos at the Mean Girls prom. We all spent time together. It was so good to see those guys. They were all dressed up in their adorable suits, and we got to just reconnect and talk, and I think we're gonna go golfing soon. Yeah, I those guys are, I talk about the 13 Reasons Why years as my college days because it was, 4 consecutive years of my life once I turned 18. So it was, they're literally like my college buddies. So it's always, it's so great to see everybody. But LA is simultaneously the smallest and biggest place there is.
Yeah, I've just got time for one
Yeah.
more before I go. But I just thinking because we were
Yeah.
sort of speaking a lot about horror movies in this, but looking at your kind of like career, there's so much other genres. There's dramas and comedies and all sorts of things that you.
Yeah.
But I just wonder, off the back of all of these great projects, because it's such an eclectic range, you've obviously created quite a big following. You've got 2.8 million followers on Instagram, which is kind of crazy. I just wondered, I'm interested
Yeah.
kind of still, I'm going to say like a newfound kind of phenomenon. It's not newfound in the sense it's been around for like 10 or 15 years, but going back to like the 60s, 70s, 80s, there was no such thing of this. So I just wondered, is there a pressure that comes with social media? I guess do you feel like there's a whole added element to your job having that very public
Mm,
career and a lot of people that follow you for you, not just for your characters, and trying to kind of manage all of that side of things?
definitely. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think this is really uh just off the top of my head, there's this really interesting video of Ben Affleck that's been going around the internet recently about him talking about he's like fame, you can keep it. I don't really like none of that appeals to me. It doesn't bring anything of value to me. He talks about how he's actually a shy person and he feels like he is misquoted and misunderstood and misjudged a lot of the time and he kind of talks about it just being like a side effect of the thing that he actually wants to do. And I feel like that's kind of the way that most actors probably feel about it most of the time. My personally, I love movies and TV, and I just want to like make that. If Instagram and Twitter weren't, kind of intrinsically linked, I could leave it. It doesn't really make much of a difference to me. I loved in the early days of social media that uh it was a very new way for people to be able to interact with their fans and actually have some one-on-one kind of relationship and kind of have an inside look. But I think a lot of that has kind of been soured over the years by you've got bots and like weird algorithms and also different ways of trying to interact with a post in order to get the algorithm moving as opposed to interacting with it because it's something that you personally connect with. So it's weird because on one hand too, the Instagram and the social media also will allow, someone in my position like some fantastic opportunities that maybe you would not have before, that you wouldn't think. That to not only get to like talk about our films and showcase our films, but also get to like life updates, or maybe cool business opportunities that connect with other things that you're interested in that maybe you wouldn't have thought of before. So in that regards, it's it can be very cool. I was a kid that grew up loving ice hockey, but I could never afford it. It's a very, very expensive sport. And now because of Instagram, I get to work with a really cool hockey brand, and they are giving me gear to try out. And it's like, oh, that's a really cool thing. Like, this has given me, it affords me the opportunity to now try this thing that I always wanted to do. And, maybe, we obviously just finished however many months of strikes and things. It's like, a lot of people in our industry are thinking about how they're going to pay their rent next and are trying to save up a lot too. So having, a thing like that where I can have a hobby like hockey, and that's not an investment that I maybe have to pull out of my savings to be able to do, that's a really cool thing, as well as growing the sport. But yeah, I don't know, I think it's I wish it would kind of, I wish it kind of remained what it used to be, where it was like a really cool way to get people excited about the next episodes and the next stories that we're telling, and how this can connect to you, and how you could empathize and connect with this story that we're trying to tell somewhere, and maybe you could tell your friend about it. I don't know, it's kind of been sullied.
Yeah, no, it has a bit, but
Yeah,
but still, your content's good. So just got to keep putting out nice content.
thanks.
That's all you can do, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah,
But thank you so much for your time today, Devin. It's been a real pleasure speaking to you, and
absolutely.
happy birthday for 10 days time as well.
Oh man, that's so kind of you to say. Thank you so much, Stefan. I really appreciate all your time and your enthusiasm and all of the questions that you came with today. Thank you very much.
So much, man. Take care. See you later. Bye.
You as well. Have a great one. Thank you.
Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, you guys!
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey, you guys!
Hey, you guys!